All right, I'm going to take off the mask here for ease of pronunciation and hearing me here. So I told Daryl I'm probably going to be the one, since I'm a windbag, I'll probably be the one that ends up buying drinks for everybody here. Yay! Woo! And I'm really excited to be here. This is a year plus in the making, right? This talk. So it's actually nice to actually physically be here with you guys to be able to talk and present on this. So as Daryl said, I oversaw in my job and role in this project early on. Just to give a little background, and I'll keep things moving here, but the original master plan garden for Wellfield for this particular space, the island garden, was actually kind of supposed to be an Asian fusion garden. There was like Chinese and Korean and Japanese kind of all thrown together. And a board member and myself, this is back in the 2014 era, kind of slowly over time educated and convinced the board to slim that down to one cultural expression and honor one, rather than kind of smash it all together. And so this is the end result of that. And part of that process, of course, was hiring SADA. So I'll give you a little bit of the backstory on the whole organization, because, of course, gardens don't, as an artistic expression, don't arise out of thin air. They come with a backstory in their development. And why the whole focus on the Brownfield will hopefully be pretty evident. Give you a very brief profile of the garden itself and its construction, but really focusing on the cultural practices that relate to the resilience of the space. And if you're interested more in the features of the garden itself, we did a presentation in that kind of long series of virtual presentations we've done over this last year. I was on, I don't remember, it was back in October, September, I don't know. It was earlier, a couple months ago. So I'm sure that's recorded. You can ask Marisa about that. So Wellfield Botanic Garden is a 36-acre property. The island garden itself is, as you'll see here, and I'll come back to the slide in a second, is sort of the crown jewel centerpiece in a lot of ways of the entire property. It started actually as a Rotary project, a community project. So community and group effort has sort of been at the heart of Wellfield Botanic Garden's genesis, and that motif carries through the whole history, which is a really great feature. In 2002, Rotary International, the umbrella organization for its 2005 centennial, challenged chapters to pick a community project and support it. So a local chapter in Elkhart, Indiana. Elkhart is about 5 to 10 miles south of the Michigan border, about 2 to 3 hours east of Chicago. So it's in the area region called Michiana. Anyway, a local chapter said, hey, let's do a botanic garden. Why not? Because why not? They started construction in 2006. They raised the money for the master plan, and then they picked this particular site. It's 36 acres. Half of that, as you can see from this slide, half of that is surface water. Incredibly clear, beautiful, clean water, and it's all pretty much man-made. So there is Christiana Creek runs through the middle of the property, which is a natural waterway, and through gate valves feeds all these various ponds. So we can literally turn off the pond. It percolates down through it's very sandy gravel. So it percolates straight through. If I get a standing water from a rain, say about 6 inches deep, it's gone within a couple hours. So we have really good percolation. Now I work at a garden where there's no percolation. It's clay, it's beautiful. Where else did I sing? So the land, or the city owns the land, and there's a 501c3 that was developed to take this master plan and operate a botanic garden on the property. Its mission, of course, is to celebrate and promote the inseparable relationship, the key aspect of water to kind of all of life, and through art, through education, through events, and grow community, which is really a hub and center of who we are and what we breathe. those who aren't familiar with what a brownfield is, brownfield by basic definition is you got a piece of property that's heavily degraded from post-industrial use, okay? Elkhart is a perfect example of a Rust Belt Midwestern town, heavily manufacturing. Currently, it's the RV capital of the world, so about 80% of the RVs that are made in the U.S. come from several different companies, and then all the supporting industry. So it's a very entrepreneurial town. They also make musical instruments, and it's an eclectic town in a lot of interesting ways. Half of this property is surrounded by neighborhoods, and then there's some abandoned factories here. So in the 1980s, the EPA designated this site as a Superfund site. They had discovered some VOCs, volatile organic compounds, in the water. And then they wanted, so a Superfund site, for those that aren't aware, it's kind of an EPA designation for any site that has environmental contamination that's going to have a long time frame for remediation. So they built these blower stacks, which are containing basically wiffle balls. The water pours over, allows the off-gassing of the VOCs, and the water is then clean and ready for drinking. And about 80% of the, or 60, 70, 80% of the water for the city comes from that particular site, from an unconfined aquifer. Various types of neighborhood activities have been taking place, from childhood swimming to other things. And so it's a heavily degraded site. It's heavily disturbed. We've heard stories that the city street department would come in they had debris left over from a project, and they would bury their stuff there. So we'd get rebar and concrete and cement, find chunks of asphalt. Ground's been turned a lot. And the type of plant cover that was there was a lot of invasives, right? So, which is typical of a highly disturbed site. So we wanted to really regenerate the land using ecologically based principles, science-based approaches to the operations. And then added on to that, another constraint were all, of course, EPA regulations that come with having, a potable water site. So all of my chemical applications, all of you that can spray, copper, solutions for fungicide controls can't do it. Even basic organic approaches like horticultural oils, can't use them because it's a petroleum base. So I had a lot of constraints, and anything I did had to get approved through the city's EPA compliance officer, basically. So all of those add some interesting dynamics that I was certainly not used to in other places I've worked. Here's the master plan that Sada drew up for the site, and the kind of the basic profile for it. It's about 0.8 to 1 acre, depends on where you want to draw your little magic red line. Great elevation changes from here to where this picture is taken is about 11-foot difference in height. So for flat Indiana, that's pretty great. That's like a mountain. So, what's interesting about the site is its experience. The challenge that Sada had there is to not only create a space that you walk through and experience like this one, but it's also be viewed 360 externally. So, right, it's kind of the typical traditional landscape, painting style of garden, plus being a stroll garden. So, finding those balances and how you make that work was a challenge. Some unique features, the pavilion that was put on here very early on. That was part of actually an original previous. It's probably one of the only things that's kept from the original design predating Sada. Mountain stream that was built in. Contrasting forms, there's about 6 different types of ground cover that we use. So we really accentuated the ground plane with the slopes, contrasted to the higher spacing of shrub and trees. Lanterns, of course, bridges, and stonework. And what's great about this is all the contracting was done locally. All the artisans were local. We had worked with the same group of people for each of these different themed gardens, whether it was a children's garden, the Japanese garden. We built this collaborative community of garden builders that could work together and play off of each other's ideas, regardless of who the designer was. So that's really cool.
This is a picture taken probably in 2006, maybe 7. So this was originally just flat, and then the original kind of site work they did was take 6 ponds and turn them into 4 on the property. They took some of the cut that they took out of the ponds, and then they built the big mound. That's kind of where our soil came from originally. And then it sat for years, and I'll spare you the story, but it sat from basically, we'll say 2007, 8 till 2016, 2018 when we started working on it. Of course, then we brought Sada into the picture, and Sada, those who know Sada, he's a great teacher. So he taught us a lot. I got to go to Portland and be part of their intermediate workshops to kind of learn some of the basics. A lot of my role in this project was sort of quality control when Sada was not there to actually give oversight, working with the various artisans. Obviously, early steps was getting the site work. One of the things that made this project also a challenge is accessibility. So this is south to north. We had to build and kind of work our way outwards. Our site, our staging area was here. So we had to kind of build up to a certain area, get that all done, plantings, grading, lighting, all of that, then do the next section, and then knock out that bridge, and then do the next section. So it was you had to have some very careful project planning and project management on this. The construction of the pavilion, I'm going to flip through these because, again, that's given in another presentation, and I really want to focus in on what comes once you got the garden birthed, then what, right? I remember a presenter at the 2014 Chicago conference talking about, Shabby's gardens are 40% build, 60% fostering, right? And so that's really what I want to kind of get into, because that's where the rubber meets the road here for us. And there's several obstacles we have and Sada wanted us to think, what does this garden look like in 50 years, right? You got to look at the long game, not just the immediate impact of when you're done and you cut the ribbon. So soil rehabilitation is probably the biggest issue. So I'm dealing with sandy gravel, slope, beating sun, high pH of 7.8 or so, not a ton of organic content, and so moisture retention's a long-term issue. Not only getting plants through the plants transplant shock, but then of course just getting them to grow. There's an incredible amount of weed pressure, and then look at the kind of how do we get people engaged to stay with it over the long term. So those who know me, and the folks in Elkhart are listening in here, they know that I'm a big soil fan. I'll slap you if you say dirt instead of soil. Dirt's what you get on your fingernails. Soil is what you plant in, right? It magically changes when it gets on your shoe. So I spend a lot of my time as the horticulture director getting us focused on rehabilitating the soil. I think the science has been emerging over the last 20 years that shows that soil biota is the missing link. They're the middleman between mineral and root. And getting that robust, soil ecology going is really where your success is going to be in regenerating and the whole and creating a resilient plant. So practices that we use, of course, prior to planting and then also throughout the process, and we do use this throughout the gardens, not just in the Japanese garden, but things that we do like pre-planting, of course, we put down a top dress of compost. We do not work it in, we let nature do that, or as we plant. So we're a very low-till, no-till type operation. You also increase that by more perennial cover, right? Less annuals. We try to do as much composting in place as possible. So we have a lot of oaks, which will help with our soil pH drop over time. We collect them, we chop them up right there on site, and then we literally throw it back out on the ground. Prior to cleaning up we go through first, of course, and remove any diseased material that we see so that it ends up not getting back out there. So we do that. We also then inoculate with compost extracts and then, of course, just keeping the ground covered through various ways, right? These aren't rocket science. You're all familiar with these things, but all these little things add up when you have a multi-pronged attack. But also, what's really important is the monitoring, right? You can't manage what you can't have some kind of numbers around. So there's the traditional soil tests.
which all of my gardens would get, you know, a regular, frequent, we did it every 2 years, just for costs, and we don't need the numbers that frequently. But I looked at organic content, CEC, and the pH. And this is the test result from 2019 for this particular garden. And there's the big magic number of 7.8. So I also had to then bring in pelletized sulfur on heavy doses twice a year to start bringing that down over the next, you know, millennia. And because it takes a long time, right, to change the pH. But also monitoring and testing and managing for your soil biota. So this isn't something that a lot of people do, but, you know, are you getting numbers for your beneficial fungi and bacteria? Are you managing those numbers? And that's something that, you know, there's not a lot, unfortunately, there's not a lot of labs yet out there that are doing this, but testing for that and then trying to improve those numbers, that's key. So soil retention, we did a lot of things within the construction, terracing, very close plant, of course, planting, you know, closer on center than maybe on, you know, on the lower end of the recommendation of that. Soil matting, and then of course adding, because this project took so long, I got to observe, you know, water moving across the landscape. And so instead of kind of, I think the water's going to go here and putting gutters in, I could actually kind of get a better feel. So putting guttering in, it helped going to Portland and to other gardens and seeing how they were doing, how you know, I didn't have nice roof tiles that I could put in vertically, you know, but we did our own thing. Based on what I had on site, and I think that's about as spirit of Japanese as you can get. And then the weed pressure. So this sat fallow for years, and we built up a big weed seed bank that's going to take years to exhaust, or at least get down to a far more manageable level. And so we take a very multi-pronged attack with that as well. A lot of hand pulling, because we got a lot of very passionate volunteers. The less we can turn the soil, again, the less you're going to have more seeds generating. Aggressive ground covers. This particular baby right down here that's become a fan favorite is Hernenaria glabra, or rupture wort. Very aggressive, almost invasive, but it sure does the job of covering the ground. And of course, I can't get moss to grow very well on that particular site, so this is my replacement. And accentuates that ground plane. So there was a lot of design things we were doing there. We like to burn things. we do smoke our weed there, and where appropriate, and stamp out the fires. Thank you. But then there's I remember Kendall Brown came in. I was actually, Kendall, trying to remember this morning when you came. You actually came about 4 or 5 or 6 years prior to us really getting going with this, and you had said something that was really important to us, which was, what are you going to do in this space? Like, you know, like think about how it's going to get used as you're designing it. And that's a great idea. Because if you want this garden to be supported financially and otherwise in the long run, you got to have people connect and love it. And they got to use the space and they have to connect with it emotionally. So, you know, it's not only about the people who are building the garden, but it's the programming. It's the artisans that are there to build. We had just wrapped up Origami in the Garden as a traveling exhibit we used in the space. And then also, great picture of my friend David here, who, since I'm no longer there to kind of provide that oversight, I've now moved to another position. You got to have that, you know, passing the torch to a qualified person. So David has stepped in to help, you know, teach the next generation of gardeners of how to help foster this garden towards completing the vision that Sada originally set out. So all of that together is going to make both the cultural practices and the people involved, and the fact that it was done collaboratively really is going to, I think, make this garden a beauty in years to come. Thanks.
Okay, also very glad to be here in person and thankful to the Japan Foundation for their help with this conference, also at the Hammond Garden, and help with sending me here today. So Natalie Hammond's Japanese stroll garden turns 60 this year, and we marked that birthday 1 year late, but actually in a really timely way, with our 2021 garden revitalization project. And So far, we've worked with the landscape designer and restorer Charles King Sadler, and he's helped us to assess the garden, identify what he calls its assets, the great views, the venerable trees, and also its deficits, areas in our garden where overgrowth or loss of plantings, areas where the visitor loses their way. And I don't mean to say that they'll actually get lost. This is a 3.5-acre garden, but they don't know where to look, they don't know where to go. And once we've completed the revitalization, we hope that as visitors walk or stroll or make their way through the garden, they will know where they can look and where they can rest. This is also 2 years that I've been involved with the garden. And what I've realized over that time is that our Japanese stroll garden, it's a central part of our estate, but at the same time, the other parts, the Georgian manor, what Natalie Hammond called her guild house, those are also essential enclosure for the Japanese stroll garden. So in this presentation, I'll introduce the garden's geography, and then the dynamic Ms. Natalie Hammond, who built the garden, and then using historic photos that we're gradually finding in our archive and contemporary photos, I'll share how key garden areas looked, how they do look, and in some cases, offer some ideas for how they might look in the future. So to give you some context, here we are, the Hammond Japanese Stroll Garden. That's about an hour and 15, an hour and a half minutes drive north of New York City. And if I zoom in, and actually it's hard even to use that word zoom anymore, but if I zoom in here, what I want you to notice on this slide is the Titicus Reservoir, and that's to the west of the garden, and then the Mountain Lakes Park, which is to the southeast. The garden is on a high point. You'll see that better in a minute. And in 1961, the views to the water and the mountains, they're rounded, ancient mountains, those views were clear 60 years ago. And if you look at this aerial photograph, you can see the land falling away on either side of our garden. I think I can use the mouse here to point out the garden. By now, post-agricultural forest has developed around this side. And actually, what you're looking at here looks like water, but I think it's a hayfield, and that's now open land trust property. I also wanted to mention field stones. If you drive up to the Hammond, you'll see beautiful stone walls on the estates that are near us. And those stones also shape our garden, and we'll see some more pictures of those. Ms. Natalie Hammond was the daughter of John Hayes Hammond. He gained great wealth as a mining engineer, and he was later involved in diplomacy. And here you see a photograph of quite a mature-looking Natalie accompanying her father on his first trip to Japan in 1921, and then later as a young woman. She was a debutante in Washington, D.C., but she moved to New York and she pursued an artistic career. She was quite successful. She worked with Martha Graham to arrange a theater production company. She patented a process to apply metal to fabrics. Later, she published hand-illustrated books, and she collected. She gathered items ranging from British hair jewelry to American quilts to Japanese sword hilts. And we still have some of that collection, though not all. The garden originated in 1956 when she found a piece of pasture land. This was once clear of buildings on which to build her suburban home. So we should think of the Hammond Garden as one of many artistic projects of the founder. She modeled what she called her, at that time, Oriental Stroll Garden on an Edo Stroll Garden. And of course, here I'm showing you the beautiful Kenroku-en in Kanazawa. But in 1960s, reporters emphasized the garden at the Hammond, I'm quoting them, is not an exact recreation of its Japanese counterpart. It's rather a borrowing, using indigenous plantings to capture the feeling of the Japanese original. But when we consider the whole of the Hammond estate that I was talking about in the introduction, we see that even the feeling that Ms. Hammond was looking for wasn't entirely Japanese. As she said, quoting her now, "In my travels, I've always collected things I thought went together in a way that made it possible to imagine what it had been like to be alive at the time and place from which they came. You wouldn't expect a Chinese riverboat to look at home on top of a Westchester hill, but I think it does." And actually, I'm not sure if she kept on thinking that the boat looked at home or if her visitors did, because after the early 60s, I don't see that boat in pictures of our pond anymore. So as we work now around the garden, let me start with the pond, and you're seeing that in the bottom image. Here's a map that I believe Ms. Hammond drew of the garden. I can't be sure, but it is dated 1961. If you look at our pond now, you can tell that growth plants have transformed the original look. And looking at that, that signals some of the design and ecological changes we need to make in the garden. To the best of our knowledge, Ms. Hammond and her team of local professionals dug the pond, lined the bottom with clay, and installed a pump which pulled water from our well over a waterfall and into the pond. But there's no way for that water to go out. There's no way for it to circulate. And in my understanding, that's going to be key to restoring the clear water that was once there. If we look at another historic photo, evidently a little later from that one I showed with the clear pond, what I like about this one is the way you see some water lilies, some ferns on the bank, but not that complete overgrowth that we have now. And to me, that suggests the balance of plantings, but also view of the stone wall that I hope we can restore as we revitalize the garden. I wanted to say earlier on, Ms. Hammond did not work with any Japanese professionals when she built this garden. And I think that had to do with money. As she said, "I laid out every bloody plant." But she did have local help. She had a head gardener from a nearby town, a relative helped her with her Zen garden, and a Long Island architect designed her gatehouse, and we'll look at those in a bit. Here's a favorite little island in our garden. You're looking at it in the 60s and as it is today. And here we're about to look at the waterfall garden. This is where the water was pulled up and into the pond. And in the 60s, it was described as being pine shadowed with iris growing on the banks. And now, as you can see, kind of a random selection of ground covers and weeds and such are growing over that little waterfall. And what I hope we can do is transform it into the kind of water feature you might see in a tea garden with clusters of ground covers, the pine needle mulch that you also see in that bottom photo. This is what's called our lantern garden. You can just see a bit of a lantern in the top photo. And this is one of the areas that Charles King Sadler helped us to prune in the spring. And part of that work revealed a really nice stone path passing through the garden. And what I'd like to do next is have a specialist maple pruner work on that mounded maple so we can see a bit more of the branch structure within it. So next, as we go around the garden, we're entering into what Ms. Natalie Hammond called her flat garden, or this was her translation of Hiraniwa. But that term flat garden is a little deceptive because this area also has terraced stone walls using the native stone. In the 1960s, reportedly, it had hinoki cypress, Japanese holly, and white alyssum flowers. You can see some of them in the photograph cascaded over the stone walls, simulating water. And I haven't quite put together the historic photos, but we also had a dry stream bed spanned by a bridge, and I think we're looking at the same spot with this bottom photo. But as you can see, over 60 years, the couple of euonymus that Ms. Hammond planted have grown into a hedge of euonymus with some lovely color in the fall. But what that means is we really can't appreciate this area in the way she intended. We don't have the views sorry to go back here, we don't have the views of the pond we once had, and we don't have that flat garden quality at all. And as we restore the garden, I think it's an interesting problem because I think there are two possible comparisons. Here I've put together an image of our terraced walls and then a early 20th century Ohio garden by Ellen Shipman to give us some comparable stone walls with their sharp angles. But then another comparison, here is a beautiful dry stream bed by the veteran Japanese garden designer David Slauson. It's a private garden, and that might too be a model for this area. So it's going to take some work to decide and then to rebuild this Hiraniwa area. Continuing through the garden, this is what Ms. Hammond called her hill garden, also her mountain walk, also her borrowed landscape. And you can see that here too we have more of those stone walls. The area overall had a pine garden, a hillock, and then a reflecting pond in front. I think with the panoramic shot in the bottom, I think we're looking towards those terraced walls that have now tumbled down. There are the pines in the background. This was the reflecting pool in front. Visitors in the 60s really loved this walkway through the water. And here you're looking at the marshy area, what that reflecting pool has turned into. One of the reasons I like to use this photograph is that, you know, here, if the coloring is good here, you can see a little bit of a golden tipped cypress. And here you see it, how big it's grown in the bottom photograph. And I think this is a good point to emphasize, obviously, but it really impresses you when you're in the garden. Relationships of scale change dramatically over 60 years. So in all these historic photos, whether it's the yew trees, the crab apples, these cypress, they've grown from waist height to tree size. And so as we work on this garden, one of the things we want to do is restore something of the shrub layer, the kind of human-sized layer, and keep still the old and big trees. So this isn't on Ms. Hammond's map, so I'm not sure when the maple garden was planted, but this is the area where we hope to establish a tea house in the future. And what I like about this idea is this is an eclectic garden, but in one area we could perhaps have a tea house with a proper roji or tea garden around it so people can have that experience, but also enjoy the garden with its diverse influences. And so when I say that, here we are walking up the west side of the garden, and that's when you have clear views to the manor house. And at the bottom photograph, off to your left would be the pond, so you'd be looking at the pond. But what you can see here, I think these photographs do a nice job of showing very strict, regular layout in front of the manor house, but those azaleas making a nice segue between that formal area and the Japanese portion of the garden. And to speak briefly about the manor house and its architecture, this is well known, but during the modernist period when Ms. Hammond was building, there was a lot of appreciation for new industrial materials. The manor house is built with concrete blocks, and at the same time, there was appreciation for Japanese Zen or rock gardens, and we have one of those as well. This was built by Ms. Hammond's relative, and the gatehouse next to it built by that Long Island architect that I mentioned. And we've since removed that falling down wall next to the tea house, but the gatehouse is still standing. At the time and still now, this structure served multiple purposes. It was an entry to the garden, it evoked Japan in the minds of the visitor, and it was a focus for views inside the garden. And I want to say that we can't call our rock garden or our gatehouse Japanese. They were built by Americans in the 1960s, but they are a testament to the importance of Japan to Ms. Hammond and to her visitors and to architects and gardeners at the time, and in that respect, they're authentic and they're important to our garden. So now as I conclude, let's go back through that gatehouse, exit the garden, and sit on Ms. Hammond's formal Japanese patio. And as I end, I want to ask a question and answer it as well. Is the Hammond unusual in combining historic European styles, modernism with its concrete blocks, and Japanese styles? The answer is not at all. And we might compare the Hammond on a much smaller scale to the Hillwood Estate in Washington, D.C. And I want to say thanks to Ken Brown for suggesting to me that comparison. At the Hillwood, there is a Japanese-style garden, landscaped by a Japanese-American gardener and architect in 1955. There's a formal French garden, there's a broad lawn, there's a conservatory. And so it seems to me that the Hammond, I look at it one way sometimes and it looks Japanese. I look at it another way and it looks Anglo-American. And so I put together this collage. You can see the Kyoto image, our Hammond garden in a historic photo, and another Ellen Shipman designed garden. So I hope as we revitalize it in the Hammond way, in the American way, we can let all of these diverse influences shine in the garden. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Castellon. I'm a landscape contractor from Oakland, California. And for the last 25 years, I've specialized in Japanese-style gardens or naturalistic gardens. A lot of my gardens are just natural looking, and people don't really think of them as Japanese, but I do. And I'd like to also say a lot of my great opportunities started here, doing volunteer work while they were building this garden years ago. In fact, I met Mr. Tamane, who's the head gardener at Kinkakuji, here several times, working with him on rock placements and so forth. And we were asked him if we could come work with his crew, and he said yes, and we got to spend a month at Kinkakuji. So that was I'm always thankful for the garden here. So the talk today is about several gardens we built in the Bay Area with Avram Dalton, who a lot of you know, he used to work here, and Eto-san, who's a man he made arrangements with to work with from Japan. And Linda Matthews, who I didn't see here today, but I thought she'd be here, was our immigration attorney who set up visas for them to actually come and work in this country. So Let's see what we got here. Okay, so here's a container that showed up one day, unannounced, with material from Japan for the garden. This was a garden we did in Woodside that was just about finished when COVID broke out and they were sent back to Japan. And it's getting prepared to be finished up completely in the near future. And I got to mention the one fun thing that we unloaded that crate from Japan, and there was all this beautiful stone, all type basins, flat stone, all kinds of stuff. But there were very interesting natural stones that were kind of long and kind of skinny and narrow, and they looked, you know, familiar. And Eto-san goes, "Oh yeah, this is the stone that's the bridge in Daisen-en and at the Nijo Castle, same stone." And you're thinking, this stuff's just laying around Kyoto for hundreds of years, you know, and being reused. It had obviously been in a garden previously and then was being reused. But anyway, this first picture was a garden in San Mateo that I was renovating. And it was Ron Herman's last job. And he hired us to do all the renovation of the old Japanese garden on this property. It's a 3-acre property. And part of the plan was at the entry, there would be walls built and then a walkway going to the garden through the woods that's beyond the walls. And I was planning to do the walls, but when I found out that Avram was working with these fellows from Japan, I asked the client if he could have them come and do the walls because I knew of their abilities. So these are these castle-style walls they built at the entry. And this garden was on the NAJGA regional tour in July or August of 2017, and these guys started this the Monday after that tour. So we're going to have another tour sometime so you can come see all their work. So this is them building the temple-style wall, and you can see they put that back in there, and then it's just set in dry mortar, and they build it, and then they'll do the other side without the plywood in there. And this is built with Napa basalt, which is a locally available stone in the Bay Area. You can see the nice corners they make. It's just beautiful walls. And this is the completed wall. This garden is still being renovated. My guys are there actually today working on stuff. So it just goes on and on. In fact, Luke Benjamin, who's going to be talking tomorrow from Joinery Structures, their company is doing the interior of the house and all the garden structures at this garden as well. So after they finished the walls, there was a plan for a walk from the entry to the garden. And so Eto-san and his crew took on this entry garden pathways as well. This is Shige and Eto-san working on a section. And these are the walkways they made into the garden. The bridge was made by the Joinery Structures guys. This is all Napa basalt and some sort of stone they found at a stone yard, the long linear pieces. I'm not even sure what it was, but they really liked it and got it for a bargain. It was in the back of some place. So you can see these are the pathways. They're interlocking sections of Nobidan. And so this is where the path will start going to the garden, which I love because it's this narrow entrance between the trees. And the joinery structure guys are going to build a big gate here that you enter and then go in and follow that path that you saw earlier into the old garden. The garden in the back, the actual garden, was built 100 years ago. And they have a pavilion from the 1915 Pan American Exposition that was put into the garden. Okay, this was the next garden we worked on, which was in Mill Valley. And this garden I participated in. All the walls and so forth that you saw before, they just did on their own. So this was a job we got in Mill Valley, California. And again, the clients wanted me to build the garden, and I said, look, I have the opportunity to bring this crew in, and I think it would be to your advantage to have that done. And as it was mentioned previously, I'll look for any opportunity to improve my skills. And working with people like this, it was just amazing. my guys, I have one of my guys turned into an artist after just working with these guys for a couple months. Literally changed his whole style. Mine too. My teacher, Masi Mizumi, had me setting rocks in a certain way. Eto-san gave me other ways of looking at them, and so has everybody I've worked with. But it's just really neat to work with different people and see their different styles of putting the stone together. This was a spider crane. The guys loved their equipment. You can see the limited space we had there. We only had like 34 inches or something to get around the corner there, but they got this spider crane in to work. I do a lot of work with a tripod, and we still needed the tripod because this could only get rocks a certain distance up the hill once we're inside. And here we are. This is the first stone. We built a large dry waterfall. They didn't want water in the whole waterfall, but they wanted the sound and a bit of water. So this is like a seep that comes out and falls off of this stone, and they're just testing the angle there. This is starting the stonework. This is Greg Kittajima, who might be here right now, and Asher Brown from New York came out to help with us. It was a really fun to work with all these different people on the job. The beauty of it was the teachers I have here gave me a really strong foundation, as was mentioned earlier. So even when I went to Japan, I felt at home in a way. You know, I feel like these people are still way beyond me, but you feel at home and I understand what's going on. And it felt like this here. With Eto-san's crew and with my crew, Eto-san was like, you guys could come work with us in Japan, you know, and it felt good like that. We're all kind of on the same page. I still feel like a beginner, and to work with people like this just puts you that much further forward. This is a wall in that garden that Eto-san did, and when we started, there's no plan. They just come in, we're going to do this. We're going to have walkways here, we're going to have a dry waterfall, there's sitting areas. And I've always admired walls like this when I'm in Japan, but kind of shied away from trying to put something like this together. So this is literally the first morning. He starts building this thing right in front of me. And again, I don't know what he's going to do. We're just there, you know, give him rocks, follow his lead. He starts building this wall right in front of me. And next thing you know, you're building it and putting it together and getting coached on how these rocks fit. These rocks fit tight. They all have mortar behind them, but they were tight. You could have walked on them without the mortar behind them by the way they set together. So again, this was that kind of thing that was like just amazing to me to have that happen. So here's Eto-san. He would design little things like this as he went along. This was the lantern. The clients didn't want a lantern, then they decided they wanted a lantern. And since it was an all-rock garden, Eto-san didn't think a granite lantern was appropriate, so he wanted like a mountain lantern, so we built it out of stone. So we're sitting there at lunch one day. The bottom stone, he goes, that'll be our lantern. It's just a stone that's in the whole group that had come. The other stone is just a little flat stone. So we're literally having lunch, and he starts doing this, puts the stone on top. Then they needed to make a firebox for it. Well, this is the very top. We didn't have a top, so I found this at the rock store the next morning and brought it over, and we put it on. But what they did, the firebox was challenging because they go, what are we going to make a firebox out of? So they just look through a bunch of books and they find the Bodo-en lantern just has like 2 stones on either side for the firebox. And they decided that's what we'll do. So you can see how it is here. And that's on a hillside. There's a dead man with rods in that thing into a sunken concrete foundation underneath. And this is getting stones in. Large stones like that's about 2.5 tons. And you can see my roller there. This is this thing that my teacher Masi Mizumi made up. They're gravity rollers like they use in warehouses to move boxes. You see them rolling boxes on them. We flip them upside down so the rollers are on a 2x12 plank, and we can put really big rocks on them. Put them on a 2x12 plank and just roll them in. On flat surfaces, we can go into backyards easily. We go through houses, garages, wherever whatever you need to do. So there was no other way to get this in there. We could have got a crane in for this one thing and shut down the whole street and spent a fortune, but it takes like an hour to get that thing in there with the roller. And here's Eto-san building a wall. This was another thing. Where'd he go? Oh, there he is. Oh, look, he's got that little wall half done. That was the other thing I loved. It started here, and it just went like this, right on around. Very little hesitation in what was going on. But he was great at filling us in, too, as we went along. You know, a lot of guys would just do their thing, and you just get what you can out of it, you know, and watch. But he was really good about talking about how we were doing things as we went along. So this is the stairwell. Now, the other thing you have to remember here, you see the steps are high. There's actually a deck now that has been built right into the stones where the steps are that make those treads appropriate height. This is the stair up on the other side. And the other thing is, this house is just getting completed. There's actually a bridge that goes from the master bedroom to that upper seating area where the lantern is. And that is actually built now. We're going to have to go back and finish some things in a little bit. But again, you can see these walls. I just loved his walls. And this is the finished dry waterfall. You can see the stone with a bit of water spilling from it on the left-hand side. And that's just a recycling deal that just comes up and is a small seep. So you're getting this nice trickle sound of water. This was just, it's a natural redwood hill behind this house. This is another, I'm having a hard time seeing, oh, here, look, it's right in front of me. That's better. Yeah. Okay, here he is telling us what's up. That's his son Toshi there with him. So he took a great deal of interest in having us understand what was going on. He really wanted us to be good at what we do. The Japanese model, they don't want us running around saying, hey, I worked with him and doing lousy work. They want you to, he wanted us to be really good and really showed a lot of interest in what we were doing. Here's Shige doing some nobidan at a little garden we built in Oakland. And this garden, again, this is that Napa basalt. They put in those granite pieces first on little concrete pedestals and then leave all the other space open and then just start filling with the stones, this Napa basalt. They're actually, you know, fist size or bigger stones that are thick. They're not skinny pieces of stone. They're very thick, but they have a flat surface in some area. And we would just set them in. And this was a great learning thing too. Like you're setting those in and your tendency will be make things fit together, but you're always got to be thinking about what the next thing is. Because you can make two fit together, but then you've created weird spaces behind it that make it harder to put things together. So they would just break it or whatever they do to make the transition between them fit better. And it goes faster and it looks fantastic. So little things like that that you will pick up. This was a little grotto they were making. This is outside of the master bedroom of this house. And this was basically my design, and I went away for a week, and they got started, and I came back, and it's like a week later, this was all done. All the stonework, there's a waterfall in the back. I wanted a walkway to just come up out of the grotto to the other garden. He made a walkway go all the way around it, over the bridge, and then back through the garden, which was even more spectacular. And that bridge is recycled granite. It comes from somewhere back east. It actually had barnacles on it, like it had been in water. So it's all cut granite. In San Francisco, like all the curbs were made out of cut granite from the Sierras, and they take it out and recycle it. It makes great like paving material or bridges and so forth. So that one he liked and had to put it in. So this is the view from the master bedroom. It's like a little seating area. The deal was when the house was constructed, you went out through those sliding doors into a bank of soil that was like 4 feet tall. So we just cut into it and made this grotto. Then around you come up over the top and there's more garden. You can see that's going into the grotto. And this kind of wall, I just love these walls he would do. This is another one of those walls that I just love the style. The other thing about this is these are moss rocks from up in the Central Valley of California. They were actually volcanic. They were spewed out of volcanoes and hit the ground as individual pieces. And over the thousands or million years, you know, they've gained a lot of character. They have moss and lichen on them. But one side, you know, most of it will be good with a natural patina, moss and lichen all over it. But the part that was in the ground, it looks like dirt. So we have a tendency to not like to use that. Well, they don't care. If that was the best side, that's what we're going to use, whether it's the dirt side or the good side. But then what they do is they take that concrete color, it's just iron oxide, I believe, and mix it with water and spray it. And everything just turns like a darker black color and everything looks the same. And they would do that with everything. They'd go over the walls and spray them. So it actually makes it more even color. Here's another picture. There's the waterfall and bridge. This is that Nobidan that you saw Shige working on earlier. And again, there's a deck now that's built right into the bottom of that. And that is all complete now. So this was, how did this all come about? They got another job in Woodside, California, a big property. The joinery structures guys built the house. It was one of Paul Disco, if you know of him, the joinery guy. It was one of the last houses he built. A lot of the structure guys worked on that. And Paul Disco had met Eto-san and said, I told the clients, I want these guys to build your garden. So this is Eto-san and Avram working on the design. This is the most design I've ever seen from them. They're actually sketching pictures. This is what the house in the front will look like when it's completed. And it's mostly completed, except the project was cut short by COVID. The client actually put the guys on the plane back to Japan on like a Friday afternoon. And then on that Monday, San Francisco shut down. That's when they closed everything down. We couldn't even go back to our projects. But this is Avram's sketching. He does a beautiful job. But like I said, most of the time there's no plan. These sketches and all are occurring during the process, basically. And this is one of those jobs, just splitting some old basalt they had there. Here's Avram and one of my guys, and Eto-san placing a stone. See how that stone is hooked on that hook, on the hook, where they just lay the cable over and it's being held by its own pressure? I don't recommend this for. My guys were into it for a while until a big one dropped out. And here we all are sticking this, putting some rocks together. There's the tripod equipment. So this is some more of the rock work. This is very preliminary. I don't have any further back. And this is this is one of our crews. It's Avram, Eto-san, my guy, our video. You can see Shige back there, my guy, Liko, my guy, Holden, and Toshi. And this is when they were working on the Woodside project. But like I said, we've had other people. Greg Kitajima's helped us several times on these projects, and Asher Brown's come out a couple times to work on them as well. So, yeah, so I hope that was of interest, and I highly recommend if you can ever get together with people like this, they'll sure make you look good, so, and make you better at what you do. So thanks, everybody.
I'd like to show one of my past research reported in International Sociological Association in the past February. Taste in music still matters. A kind of culture capital, taste in music still matters. So could you please look at this growth tabulation graph? There's a two group, which one has a classical music experience at least in 1 year, and non-classical music experience in 1 year, and ask them, your organization drives ideas and creativities, and classical musical experience group is their positive experience exceed 10% the negative, but non-classical music experience is no significant difference. Why? So, taste in music in the form of classical music experience in terms of taste in the music does matter. And my key procedure is mass market research based on my professionality. I'd like to share the data on March 2020 and 3,000 people on age 20 to 69 working person in Japan via internet. Well, today we talk about Japanese garden. I tried today appreciation for Japanese gardens may be a form of culture capital. It may be. If so, it might refer to job performance. Shall we test? Well, at first, about Japanese garden, I'd like to pick up top 20 rank Japanese gardens on Yosai ranking from the Atachi Museum, Katsurarikyu, Yamamoto Day, Hair Hotel, and so on. Here, I acknowledge ongoing discussion, especially by Katahira Manabe sensei 2 years before. Yosai ranking is very, very interesting and outstanding, but their actual methods has been discussed, especially in the viewpoint of fairness and accuracy. And I miss the rankers and the experience. Those experience or the skill of the ranker is not disclosed. But however, it has achieved so great. Yosai ranking has great impact on Japanese garden community in Japan. So I quote their ranking. I choose to quote their ranking. This is my decision. And about second, job performance index, I choose one index. I'm confident for my professional performance quality, yes or no. For Japanese working person, this question is slightly sensitive. Which one, positive or negative? The fact is, yes, I'm confident. Confident group is 48%. No, I'm not. Is slightly exceeding the positive answer, 51%. Almost 48 bias, 52. And there is no correlation to age and age group. Right? And regarding appreciation, I asked, you know or visit those gardens as listed? The fact is here, around 20% did not know or visit those gardens. And 37% know or visit 1 to 3 gardens. So almost 56% of Japanese working person did not know or visit more than 3 gardens. On the contrary, top 2% visit or know 90 to 42 gardens. There is a big contrast. Well, those appreciation and job performance. I'd like to show you a cross tabulation like this. Well, red one is positive performance quality, and the yellow bar shows not confident for their professional quality. And here, this group know any of Japanese gardens 1 to 3, 4 to 7, 8 to 18, 9 to 42. And the top line is total. Look at here. The people, Japanese working people, knowing more than 8 and more than 19 Japanese gardens is exceeding very, very highly on the Parison group, almost 20% higher than those people. So I'd like to close. This research suggests that the more a working person has experience with Japanese gardens, the more he or she is confident in their professional career. Well, cultural experiences in the form of knowing or having visited Japanese gardens shows a strong correlation to a person being self-reliant in his or her professional career. As such, the culture capital in the form of appreciation for Japanese gardens has a tangible impact in the real business world. Okay, shall we pray together? Let me share my thoughts and let me hear your thoughts. The reference is here. Thank you. Any comment, any question are welcome. Goto Sensei, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Well, if you have any question, okay. In your research, is there like age related, the confident to the job? Is that related to the age? How does it link?
Age rank, you mean?
Your research is on the confidence of the job, and does it related to the age? Like older get more confidence, younger, and that kind of age. How does it link to this appreciation Japanese garden?
Well, at first I'd like to say their confidence to job is no correlation to age and age group. Here you will find. Can you look at can you find my slideshow via screen? Okay, is that okay? Well, again, there is no correlation to their confidence to age and age group. Age group is 20 to 29, 30 to 39 by 10 years grade rank. The maximum age is 69. The minimum is 20.
Okay.
And garden appreciation, there is correlation to age, but this one, you'll find 69 people knowing or visit 19 to 42 gardens. Very the top rank of Japanese gardens. They are slightly younger, not older. I don't share these details in today's presentation. In the future, I'd like to talk about this one again. Much older people like Japanese gardens more, but the highest Japanese garden level is slightly younger here. Is that enough answer for your question? If not, ask me again.
Okay. I think please answer these two questions very quick. One is why did you pick classical music, not like Beatles or some new age music?
Thank you. This is logically, Voodoo says high culture and low culture. Voodoo says high culture is a kind of classical music, and high culture, classical music, refers to high grade or high appreciation for culture something. Voodoo says this is one reason. The second reason is simply I love. Simply I love.
Okay. We have to wrap up, but one more question. How did you select the 3,000 people?
Well, 3,000 people is registered in the internet research panels. For usual procedure for marketing activity, I will ask them to answering from automatically. The answer is they are registered to internet research panels.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again, Mr. Mori.
I'm very happy to be here because I like to talk about private gardens because so many people and my client wanted to know how to start Japanese garden and what is the Japanese gardens. So I always thought people and the garden belongs to each other. And my father was a mountain climber, so he took us children mountains all the time. And I realized as a small child is even the trees and stones and whatever you see on the way or whole mountain, you feel so comfortable, so natural. And then they were saying that we were here for a long time and also at this moment. And because the right time and the right moment, light placed, I feel so comfortable. And that's what I'm looking for, that feeling for my garden creation for my private clients. And where should I put this one here? To go forward here. Okay, and also I am fascinating with the light come through the garden. And this, sometimes in the morning in my garden, I see this light come through the trees, and I feel like, my gosh, how beautiful it is. And I'm sorry, only one person I see it, but for the clients also experience the same thing. And it is so important for me to appreciate nature and the garden from the very beginning. And this is another sunlight come through. And this is also back. You can see the light shine in the back side of the garden. And it's a light makes me feel so wonderful. That's the reason I make a garden almost. And this is a private garden I made in Alabama. I started while they were building house and at the top of the mountain. And we had to dig waterfalls passage and so many rocks. And we really had a hard time, but we managed to make the cascade coming down from the top of the hill. And then we had to take 3 to 4 machines to do this job. And I was so scared when the operator operating this machine because the other side is a cliff, 1,000 feet down. And, but we did okay. Nobody went down there. And this is the house that they are halfway done. And we tried to build the little pond in front of that, his office. My client was a retired doctor, and so he needed very quiet moment. So we are digging hole much deeper. So the water, when the water goes, it makes wonderful sound. And this is after we built the pond. I placed the rock around it and then put the plants. And then, okay, I'm sorry. Then, as you can see, the driveway goes so up. And then, so I had to make that area safe, but also beautiful. When you come down to this house, you can see I planted cherry trees and shrubs and all other plants that will very nicely grown in that area. And then also the edge of the property, I put that azumaya so that this couple can sit, enjoy. And this after I put the water in the pond in the front. And then the waterfalls I create, it's quite a long, large waterfall from the top, the first pond, and a cascade down the second pond, and from there, third pond, where his office is. But I have to have another pond behind the house so that you can see the house kind of like a walkway where they made a gallery for their paintings. So underneath, nothing glows. So I made the cascade coming down to the third pond. And this was quite a job. And this is the bottom pond. And it took us about 2 years, but I had to go back and forth from Virginia to Alabama. So actually, time I spend is about a year. But it's a very challenging job, but I loved every minute. And this is, I went about last year this time, and the Japanese maple growing, and a lot of plants are settled, and the owner is really enjoying it. And this is the garden I built, the Japanese company and the factory in North Carolina. And then behind the hill is a conference room, so the people can see waterfall the other side. And then I did, when they are building this factory, they created a lot of dirt. So I asked them to save every dirt. So they don't have to haul away, and then I can use this dirt to make a little bit contour. And then this is, I plant a lot of azaleas and the greens, and then these companies produce some automobile parts. But the rural area, North Carolina, so the people never exposed to Japanese culture. So the president of the company asked me to give the employees some sort of Japanese culture to them in the garden. So I was very aware of. So I don't have a picture, but the other side of the factory, I made area just to place some big rocks and then just one nandina next to it, and then has sort of terrace so they can see in at lunchtime, and then not overwhelmingly imposing Japanese style, but the people feel very comfortable there. And this is a Virginia job, and they lived on the lake, but they wanted to have Japanese garden, and this is an American husband and Japanese wife, and the husband wanted to give wife a surprise gift. And so that was a big gift, but I could not make it a secret because I was working on their backyard. But she was so happy, and then we brought a lot of rocks, and then I made a waterfalls on the back, and then dig a pond and place in these rocks. And this is a springtime where the greens comes around. and then I expanded more pond toward lake. So the water, we get the pump for waterfall from the lake, and then water goes back to lake. So we just borrow in water. There's no problem. So, and then this is another job I did in Richmond, Virginia, and hard to see, but we have a beautiful river called James River in Richmond, Virginia, and then almost the river using as a background, like a barrel scene. So sometimes if you sit in this window and you're looking at and the pond and the water on the James River become one, and that's what I wanted to do. And this is on the very right of picture. That's a family room, so they can really enjoy seeing the pond. I made 2 ponds, and then the river in the back, and high elevation, so that you can see the city far back. It's a beautiful location. And this is another job. Somebody built a garden, but the waterfalls almost only 12 inches high. And then the client didn't like it, so I had to bring a lot of dirt like that, build waterfalls. And this is what we had probably 3 machines like that. And then sometimes I feel so wonderful because I'm telling men what to do. So this is completed, and unfortunately, owner's husband got Alzheimer, and she has to take care of him. And then after 6 years, they gave up on this garden, and so somebody else bought it. And when I went there, somebody pruned the Japanese maple terribly wrong. It just comes straight up and then umbrella-like. And I had to replace these trees, but that sometimes happens when you build a garden. If you don't tell, you have to let them know the maintenance is so important. But a lot of people think, okay, I have a garden, okay, now just wait for grow, but that's not happened. So, and this is the same garden, and the wife told me after husband got Alzheimer, they walk around, and then at least they gave her very peace of mind, just walking in their own garden. And this is in the city of Richmond. I did for doctor. He's a surgeon, and I made his front yard garden, but he wanted to have dry garden under the deck in the back side of the house. I didn't know the location was terribly happy, but he said that's something I needed to relax when I come home, because he has such a very stressful work. And this one, we brought the stone, and then the workers start putting the sand, and this is, I went to see him a couple months ago, and he loves when he comes home from hospital after surgery, and he just make all the patterns, and then he just enjoys so much. And I think this kind of garden is so personal, because that's just for him, but he's really enjoying, and it's really make me so happy that he really enjoying it. And this is my house, just started building, and then all those plants are so small, and a bunch of friends and workers came to help built the waterfalls and cascade down to the pond, which we built. It's amazing that the people are so, they never seen anything like that. So every time we do something, about 10 to 15 men coming, not really help, but they want to see what we are doing. And this is my youngest son, who is 12 years old. He already could operate because my husband has a construction company. So he started doing even like 7, 8 years old. So he started digging the pond deeper, and then more or less we finished placing pond stones. That was one of my best time I had, because I tell men to bring that big stone, and I didn't like it. No, I don't like it. Take it back. Bring another one. That's and then I wanted to have Azumaya over the pond, and I was walking quite a long time all over this garden to have the right size of the Azumaya. I didn't want to have too big to overwhelm the garden, or too small. And so I was working too. I was setting up stone myself. And then my sons also pitched in and came to help us. And even my father came from Japan. He's building stone wall for us. And also he's finishing up walkway. And then, can you see the young ladies on top of the roof? She's my son's girlfriend at that time, and she came to help. And then the waterfalls, the placing rocks is just almost done. So each stones we place it. My husband is a contractor, so he has to bring lots of rocks. And then we used every one of them. And then so another cascade down to that waterfalls. And this is today still looks like that. And I'm very, very pleased and very happy. And then the stones and the plants growing around the stones as well. It's now a big job is a pruning. Before I thought these never grew up, but they did. Mm-hmm. And this is a springtime. And this is also spring. And when I walk to that little passage to Azumaya, I just feel like I am in Japan, and I just make me so happy. And this is from inside Azumaya looking out. Okay. And a lot of times I use local grown native trees. In Virginia, we have dogwood trees, beautiful, and the red buds, and that goes very well into a Japanese garden. And I don't believe that we have to have authentic, traditional Japanese trees and shrubs in the garden. I believe I can still use local trees and the plants to make Japanese garden. And this is the front of the Azumaya, go up the hill. And all those stonework, mainly I did with my husband. And of course I could not lift, but he has in the machine, and I was telling him where to go. So, and this is the way to go to Azumaya. And then this is springtime. Hurry up very quickly. Okay. It's in autumn. And then this is, I really want to let you know that my grandchildren so much involved in the garden. And I'm so proud of them because I never asked them to do it. They love to do, and they just absolutely wonderful helper. But also, I love this picture. You see, his belt is too big. And so, but I think this is the way we can continue our tradition to the next generation. And they learn doing and working together and what it is like, what is the Japanese garden. And I treasure this moment with the grandchildren. See, and he can fix the tractor too. My granddaughters. And then the weeding, having a good time. And the youngest ones getting all the leaves. And they clean the pond. And then, yes, in all this, the creek and in the garden. Placing and cleaning the rock. And they cutting the trees. And collecting moss for me, planting, climbing the trees, they arranging the stones for walkway, and they cut a bamboo and they created that house for them. And yes, so I think that's it. That I hope that. I want you to feel that how much I love Japanese garden. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any question? We have 5 minutes for her. Does customer or homeowner need to understand Japanese garden philosophy to enjoy Japanese garden?
Yes, they do. I think the difference between public and private gardens is that private gardens, when the people come to visit, already established, beautiful gardens. But the private gardens, they are involved from the very beginning. And then they see how I built, and then they just watching. And so that's gradually they get, this is my garden in the future, soon. So that's a wonderful feeling for me to share with the love of creating gardens. And I think that's a big difference. So majority, my client knows Japanese culture. And then they said, we don't understand how to do this garden. So this is your garden. You built the way you like. And then I think, so I'm very lucky that all my clients never complain, never say, Junko, can you do this and that? Always 100% trusted me, which is, I think, kind of unusual. But then you need that trust when you build a garden for private homes. So, yes, they know more or less Japanese culture.
Okay, next one. Please explain how a small 45-kilogram woman can move the huge boulder. Is this possible for homeowner?
Yes, well, as I said, my husband has a construction company. Very lucky for me. And then I use his machine, his truck, his man, and then sometimes I use 4 to 5 tons boulder to create waterfalls. And that's I cannot do myself, of course, but I'll go like the stone quarries, or my husband produced a lot of rocks from the job, and I just paint it red or just showing, and the men can pick up and they put it in a big dump truck and they bring. And the only thing I do, select the rock and then place it. So I am a talker, but I don't lift rocks. And then when the time to plant, I have a nursery people work with me, and they know what I'm looking for. So they save the trees and plants. It's kind of interesting, not the straight up. And so I can use natural looking trees and shrubs and from the very beginning. So everything I look at myself, I'm so lucky that I can create the way I want to create with the things that I have with my husband and helper and my grandchildren. It's a wonderful feeling.
Okay, the last question is, what prevents Azumaya post from sinking into pond?
Okay, under the post, I place a big rock. And I don't know, probably you know, the cedar will last hundreds of years, even in the water. And we have cedar trees everywhere in Virginia. So I just go in the wood, and then let the man cut the size I want, and then use as a post. And then it's still very fresh. I built that as the Azumaya probably we did about 30 years ago, still as fresh as ever. So lucky. You have to use a cedar. And they cut it all the way to the almost heart. The heart will last hundreds of years. The skin comes off naturally. So I don't know whether you have a same cedar in other states, but the Virginia everywhere. Yeah, so. So, is that
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let me move to the third presenter.
かぐみさんどうぞ。
皆さん、こんにちは。畳職人の鏡と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いします。
Hi, my name is Yoshiaki Kagami. I am a tatami craftsman, and my name is Arya Santos. I will be interpreting on his behalf.
はい、有谷さんもよろしくお願いします。
お願いします。
まず最初に言いたいのはですね、畳は農産物ということです。そして文化の元を作っています。
So tatami is an agricultural product of Japan, and it creates the base of culture in Japan as well.
それを知ったのはですね、2006年の3月です。日本の熊本県というところでいぐさを作っているんですが、そこの農家と出会って初めて農産物と知りました。
So in March of 2006, we visited Igusa farmers in Kumamoto Prefecture, which is where the raw materials that are used to make tatami are produced. And this is the first time that we saw this.
これがですね、畳の原料となる収穫したばかりのいぐさです。
So this is a photo of the freshly produced Igusa grass, the rush grass that is used in tatami mats.
とても美しい植物です。
It is a very beautiful plant.
このいぐさはですね、昔ながらのやり方で作られています。
So this kind of planting process has been around since in the past.
冬に植え付けをします。
They begin planting in the winter.
夏の一番暑い時に刈り取りをします。
And they begin collection of the grass at the very peak of the summer.
そして伝統的な泥染めという加工をしていぐさを乾燥させます。
So they also have this traditional process of dyeing the rush grass with mud, which gives it the natural aroma as well as the color, and then it is dried before it is used in production.
で、こうやってだんだん乾燥させていくと畳の色に変化していきます。
So by drying it, this is how the tatami gets its color.
で、最後の加工はですね、やはり人の手で、厳選されたいぐさを使って加工されていきます。
So after a rigorous selection process of which grasses to use, the farmers will process them by hand.
そして、今は機械によって、織られていきます。
And then they are woven by machines.
これが、畳の材料になる畳表ということになります。
And so this is the finished product of that previous production with the machines and the farmers.
で、日本の場合はですね、いぐさの栽培から加工まで、一人の農家が一貫して行いますので、名前が入っています。
So in this process, the tatami is handled exclusively by one farmer. So at the very end of the process, the name of that farmer will be stamped on the tatami.
はい。こうやって作られているんですが、知られざる状況がありました。
So even though this is the typically well understood process of it, there was an unknown situation that arose in this process.
これはグラフなんですが、1988年には6000の農家があったんですが、今年はですね、354まで減ってしまいました。
So the last couple graphs were demonstrations of how the number of Igusa farmers, so the rush grass farmers, has decreased by region over time. In 1988, as you can see, there were as many as 6,000 farmers, but now in 2021, there are only 354.
もう信じられないぐらい減ってます。
They are decreasing at an unbelievable rate.
いろんな産業にも共通するんですが、どうしても安い中国産の畳が今は国内の 80% を占めています。
So as in many other industries, the priority has shifted to low cost, which is why now 80% of tatami mats are produced in China rather than in Japan.
やはり価格競争が原因で、ですが品質というのはあまり考えられていない状況です。
So since the price competition is very steep and many people are prioritizing this over quality, they aren't going as much to Japanese producers.
これは畳業界も同じで、畳業界、いぐさ農界ともに衰退していたんですが、この出会いからですね、私たちの新しい活動が始まりました。
So, because of this decline in the production of tatami mats overall in Japan, naturally the agriculture associated with tatami mat production has also steeply declined. But it was because of this realization that the activities that Kagami-san does have begun.
まずはお互いを理解することから始めました。
So they began first with understanding each other.
効率だけを求めるんじゃなくて、次の新しいフロンティアを探していこうということで、活動が始まりました。
So their activities began not only by looking to improve the efficiency of the process, but also exploring new frontiers for this process.
私たちが取り組んできたことを少し紹介します。
And so now we'll explain a little bit to you about the efforts that we've made for this activity.
まずは伝統的なものを守る取り組みをしてきました。
So the first priority was to protect the cultural assets of Japan, such as shrines and temples.
これは国宝の神社ですね。熊本にあります。
So this is a very well-protected shrine in Japan in Kumamoto.
私たちの仲間みんなで集まってですね、 こで手縫いの畳の奉納をしました。
So they gathered with the people of this shrine to discuss the tatami that are used in the shrine.
メディアにも取り上げられてですね、いろんな情報発信ができたと思います。
So these activities were also put out in the media, and they are rather well known.
ここは世界遺産になった教会があります。
And then this is another place where they've worked. It is a Catholic church.
中に畳が敷いてあります。
And as you can see on the inside, tatami mats are laid out on the floor.
はい。そして、そういう活動をしている中で、2017年に新しい道が開けてきました。
And throughout these activities, when they were doing them in January of 2017, they found a new way of doing things.
こちら動画をご覧ください。今回は表替えという畳替えなんですけど、古くなったこの畳表ですね、この茶色くなったもの、これを一度外して新しい畳表と換します。私は畳屋の家に生まれて4代目になります。うちの畳屋は今年で101年目です。畳には畳として存在する理由があるわけです。本質があって、やっぱり本物の材料を使わないとその機能性が発揮されないわけです。
な時はやっぱりすごくいい材料を使うとき、なおさらしっかりしない、しっかり作らないとっていう、作りながら逆に材料に教えてもらうような感覚で、お部屋が畳替えした後はまた新しい緑色になって、その時のお客さんの表情とか、そういう仕事の喜びとかをすごく感じていたので、すごい畳の仕事自体が好きでした。新しくなった部屋に入った瞬間のお客さんの皆さん同じように言うのがありがとう。それでいただいてるのはお礼をいつもお客さんに感じて、自分はこの仕事をもっと入れてやろうっていう。
はい、これはイリノイ大学のジャパンハウスさんから作っていただいた動画です。
So this was a video made by the Japan House at the University of Illinois.
これが縁でですね、アメリカの畳替えの仕事が増えてきました。
And because of this connection with the Japan House, the number of jobs that we've received has also increased.
そして2019年、こちらはですね、アンダーソンガーデンの仕事です。
And in May of 2019, we also gained a connection with Anderson Japanese Gardens in Illinois.
私たちにとってもとても素晴らしい経験になりました。
And it was a wonderful experience for both of us.
とても皆さん親切で、いい仕事ができたと思います。
Everyone was very kind and we worked great together.
庭師のティムさんも畳を縫ってもらったんですが、とてもセンスがいいと思います。
We even had some of the local people help sew the tatami mats together for us, and they did a great job.
私たちの仲間もすごくいい経験になってですね、またアメリカでの仕事を自分たちは楽しみにしています。
So it was a great experience for all of our staff, and we're really looking forward to the next time we can work in America.
そしてまた違う切り口でですね、畳の可能性を広げるプロダクトへを挑戦しています。
And in addition to this, we're also looking to expand the kinds of products that can be made with tatami.
これは畳の小さなグッズです。マウスパッドとか、デスクマットなんかがあります。
So rather than just flooring, we've also introduced some smaller kind of items that can also be made with tatami.
そしてですね、これは現代の、新しいプロダクトということで、4分の1サイズの畳なんかも、製造しています。
So we're also producing this kind of new tatami mat that is a quarter of the size of an original tatami.
はい、これは子育てをとても意識した、製品になっています。
We particularly were conscious of people who are looking to raise children in their homes when making this product.
これはイグサロールという製品です。
And then these are igusa rolls.
これは形が、丸くて特徴があって、一番大きなところは曲面に使えるということ。
So these are made specifically for their unique shape and how widely they can be used.
そしてイグサロールの中身のイグサなんですが、これは、廃棄処分されているイグサを活用しています。
So the inside rush grass, the igusa that is used in these products are the kind of rush grass that typically would not have been made it to the final production of a typical tatami mat.
はい、とても環境にいいプロダクトになっています。
So this product is great for the environment.
あとはヨガマットなんかも今、作っているところで、今は、試作、そして、モニターで体験してもらっています。
And we're also in the process of producing a tatami yoga mat, which is currently in testing right now.
畳はすごく香りがいいので、呼吸が深くなるということで、とても喜ばれています。
The tatami aroma is great for breathing, so this has been really well reciprocated by those who have tried out the product.
これは未来の畳の椅子です。チェアです。
And this is a kind of futuristic chair that we've built with tatami.
これは化粧品メーカーの資生堂さんとコラボして作りました。
And this product was made in collaboration with the well-known makeup brand Shiseido.
畳の香りはとても人の心を癒すので、美容にもいいということです。
Since the aroma of tatami is very relaxing, this has also been said to have great effects for beauty and health.
そういう活動を通して見えてきた景色があります。
And there was something that we came to understand through these activities.
畳屋という職業を再定義して、お客様に畳の価値を再発見してもらうことが必要だと私たちは考えています。
So in being a tatami craftsman, our job was not only to make tatami, but also for the customers to understand just how much value each tatami has.
で、私たちが特に意識していることは、国境を越えた価値観の共有、新しいつながりを、考えています。
So one other thing that we have been particularly focused on is crossing international borders and allowing people of different values to also understand the value of tatami and create connections through these interactions.
で、私たちの、活動は畳とという活動なんですが、その意味するところがあります。
So our activities are known as tatamito, and this has several meanings.
畳と健康、畳とアート、畳と食、いろんな畳といろんなものがつながって新しい畳の文化を作っていきます。
So the meaning of tatamito is literally translated as tatami and. So this is the idea that tatami can be used in healthcare, in art, with food, with anything really.
私たちの理念は、物語が文化を作るというふうに思っています。
So our philosophy is that tatami is part of what creates culture.
今までは畳と農業の物語を発信してきました。
So up until now, the idea of tatami is that it is simply an agricultural product.
でこれから未来に向けて私たちは、空間とライフスタイルという物語を発信していきます。
So we want, from now on, bring in this idea that tatami is also part of the space design and lifestyle in everyone's lives.
お客様と共に文化を作っていきます。
And so this new kind of culture we're looking to create with our customers.
私たちは畳は作れますが文化は作れないのでこういう考え方になります。
Alone, we can only create tatami. We can't create that culture, but together with the customers, we can build this culture together.
コラボレーションにより新しい道が開けると考えています。
So through these collaborations, we can open up new ways for connections and interactions based on tatami.
そして、ご縁を大切にするというふうに考えています。
And we are particularly valuing each and every one of these connections.
新しい道、すべては人との出会いで決まるというふうに考えています。
And we think of this in the way that each and every new encounter that we have opens doors for new opportunities.
今日の皆様との出会いに、ご縁に感謝いたします。
And we are equally grateful for this opportunity to talk with all of you today.
どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any questions? If there is a question, please give the note to me. Okay, first question. Craftsman come from Japan is too expensive. Who can install tatami in United States?
紙職人は高いということらし。
Okay.
I'm sorry, is that more to the question?
No, this is it.
Oh, yeah, okay, I'll interpret for him. 畳職人は高いっていうことで、アメリカで畳を買える人ってどんなお客さんがいますか？
はい、ありがとうございます。値段は高価ではあるんですが、お家されている方であるとか、あと日本庭園をお持ちである方で、畳の価値を分かっていただける方には購入していただきたい。
すいません、もう一回お願いします。
お茶をされている方とか、または日本庭園を持っている方、あと畳の価値をよくご存知の方は、というふうに思っています。
So generally, cultural facilities that deal with Japanese tea or other kinds of Japanese culture, Japanese gardens in particular.
No, the question is, who can install tatami mat in United States? 誰がそのアメリカでどのような人が畳を入れることができますか？業者はありますかということだと思う。
アメリカには業者さんはい ないと思います。なので、日本から私たちが、アメリカに行って畳材を作るという。
で、高くつきますよね。
それはそうですね。
So it's expensive. There's no craftsman, tatami craftsman in United States.
なので、今はアメリカにいませんが、将来的にはアメリカで活動できる職人さんを育てていきたいと思います。
He he can train somebody in United States who can make tatami in United States. That is his hope. And the second question, I think, related to this, do you have a recommendation for tatami for outdoor use? 屋外用の畳というのについて何かこうおすすめはありますか？こういうものを使ったらいい。
はい、基本的にはですね、雨に濡れると良くないんですよね。
はい。
なので、雨の日は雨に当たらないようにしていただければ、普通の畳も使えます。で、もし濡れてしまった場合もですね、すぐ拭いていただければ、畳がすぐしますので、このところを気をつけていただければ、そうでも使っていただけます。
If you are using real tatami, the being wet is really bad. So either you should install somewhere it doesn't wet, or if it get wet, you should dry as soon as possible. Otherwise, you should use some plastic. Okay.
プラスチックもありますが、あまりおすすめです。
So the plastic one is not recommended. Okay. Do the Chinese farmer also grow and process the material all the way to the woven material? 中国製のものは日本製のものと同じように製造されてるんですか？
工程はもう全然違います。中国はたくさん大量に、短い時間で作るということを目標にしています。なので品質
すいません、聞こえなかったです。
中国産はですね、大量に短い時間で作ることを目標に。なので品質は良くない。
So the process is the same, but they are making basically mass production, much bigger quantity with much faster time. So the quality is less because of the shorter time for process.
日本の畳はですね、機能性を重視して、空気を浄化する機能とかですね、湿度を調整する機能を持っています。
すいません、よく聞こえなかった。
ですね、本当にいい畳は素晴らしい機能を持ってまして、一つは空気を浄化します。もう一つは湿度を調整します。
The good tatami control the humidity and purify the air. And Japanese tatami has better function to it. The last question, how to manage the decrease of the number of igusa farmer? イグサのその製造者が少なくなってる日本で、それに対しては何か対策はあるんですか？
はい、いぐさ農家とともに今畳作りをしています。そしてお互いが残っていける道を今作りつつあるところ。
They are trying to collaborate together, which means he is trying to use Japanese product and they try to survive together.
減ってきた要因は、やはりお互いを理解してなかったというところが大きいと。
He believed one of the biggest cause of this decrease is lack of collaboration and lack of understanding of each other. Okay, thank you very much. I think this is it. This is time, 4 o'clock sharp. Okay, thank you very much all. Thank you.